Captain Alexandra Mitchell stood at the helm of the U.S. Defiant, her knuckles white against the command rail as another explosion rocked the ship. Through the viewport, Earth's orbital defense network crumbled under the Kraxan onslaught. Their crystalline ships moved with mechanical precision, their formation an ever-tightening noose around humanity's homeworld. Direct hit on Deck 3. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice cracked as he delivered the damage report. Shield generators are at 12%. Alex's mind raced through combat scenarios, discarding textbook responses that would only lead to their destruction. The Kraxan's technological superiority had already decimated Earth's conventional military response. 6 hours into the invasion, and humanity's greatest warriors lay scattered across the solar system like broken toys. Status on the emergency retrofit, she demanded, eyes fixed on the approaching Kraxan dreadnought. Its hull gleamed with an almost organic sheen, energy weapons charging along its spine. Engineering reports the railgun modifications are complete, but they're calling it a suicide run, Captain. Rodriguez wiped sweat from his brow. The recoil could tear us apart before we ever reach firing range. A grim smile crossed Alex's face. Perfect. That's exactly what they'll expect. She keyed the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency maneuver Delta 7. The bridge crew exchanged knowing looks. Delta 7 wasn't in any official manual. It was one of Alex's impossible tactics that had earned her both commendations and reprimands throughout her career. Helm, plot a course directly between those 3 dreadnoughts. Engineering, divert all remaining shield power to structural integrity. Weapons, she paused, allowing herself one deep breath. Load the railgun with every piece of debris we've collected. I want a spread pattern wide enough to hit all 3 ships. The Kraxan vessels adjusted their formation, energy weapons powering up in response to the Defiant's approach. Their tactics were flawless, their technology unmatched, and that made them predictable. They're hailing us, Captain, communications reported. The Kraxan commander is demanding our surrender. Put them through. Alex straightened her uniform, knowing this would be broadcast across their fleet. The holographic display materialized, revealing Supreme Commander Xarl's insectoid features twisted in what passed for amusement among his species. Captain Mitchell. His translated voice dripped with condescension. Your reputation for unconventional tactics precedes you. But surely you recognize the futility of resistance at this point. Alex met his compound eyes without flinching. Funny thing about humans, Commander. We have this old saying about futility. It's only futile if you play by someone else's rules. She cut the transmission with a slash of her hand. Helm, full power to engines. Plot our course straight through their formation. Engineering, prepare to execute on my mark. The Defiant surged forward, its engines screaming in protest. The Kraxan ships adjusted perfectly, their weapon systems tracking the apparent suicide run with methodical precision. They're powering up their main guns, Tactical reported. Impact in 15 seconds. Steady. Alex watched the distance counter tick down. Remember everyone, we only get one shot of this. The space between ships compressed to mere kilometers. Energy beams lanced out from the Kraxan vessels, their targeting computers predicting exactly where the Defiant should be. Now, Alex's command cut through the tension like a knife. Execute Delta 7. The Defiant's engines cut out completely. In the same instant, emergency thrusters fired in a chaotic pattern that no targeting computer could predict. The ship spun like a thrown knife, railgun ports opening along its length. The collected debris, everything from destroyed satellites to fragments of their own hull, erupted outward in a devastating spread. The Kraxan's energy shields, calibrated for concentrated weapon fire, couldn't adapt to the scattered impact of thousands of hypervelocity projectiles. Their perfect formation became their undoing as debris tore through 3 ships simultaneously. Alex watched with grim satisfaction as secondary explosions chained through the Kraxan vessels. Send the performance data to Earth Command. Let them know kinetic weapons still work. Her victory was short-lived. The bridge rocked as tractor beams from 5 more Kraxan ships locked onto the Defiant. Their backup plan, she realized, they had anticipated she might destroy their first wave. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper. "They're pulling us in." Alex nodded, already removing her command codes from the ship's computer. "Send the last transmission. Let Earth know." She looked at her crew, pride overwhelming fear. "Let them know we showed them what humanity can do." The Victory Center's crystalline walls reflected infinite images of Captain Alexandra Mitchell as she was paraded before the Kraxan elite. Her once pristine uniform had been replaced with a silvery garment that shifted colors with each movement, designed to draw attention to her apparent frailty. The neural restraints at her wrists hummed softly, maintaining the tremor in her hands that the Kraxan believed was fear. Supreme Commander Carl gestured with one segmented limb, and Alex's escort forced her to kneel before the assembled dignitaries. "Observe, noble citizens," his amplified voice echoed through the vast chamber. The famous Captain Mitchell, terror of the outer systems, reduced to her proper station. Laughter rippled through the crowd, a clicking sound like thousands of crystals chiming together. Alex kept her head bowed, using the position to study the room's security layout through her peripheral vision. 3 guards at each exit, automated defense turrets disguised as decorative elements, and at least 2 different force field frequencies protecting the upper galleries. "Tell us, Captain." Carl's translator produced perfect English. "How does it feel to know your primitive tactics ultimately failed?" Alex raised her eyes, careful to maintain the slight tremor she'd been cultivating since her capture. "It feels." She paused, letting her voice crack. "It feels like watching an empire celebrate catching a single fish while ignoring the ocean." A murmur of confusion spread through the audience. The Kraxan's literal minds struggled with metaphors, a weakness Alex had noticed during her first interrogation. Their technological superiority had eliminated their need for abstract thinking. "Your species' propensity for illogical statements will not save you," Tarl declared, mandibles clicking in annoyance. "Stand and face your betters." As the guards yanked her to her feet, Alex deliberately stumbled. Her shoulder caught one guard's equipment belt, and in the moment of contact, she felt rather than saw what she needed. An access key, identical to the one she'd spotted during her first day of captivity. Perhaps a demonstration of human fragility. Carl suggested to appreciative clicks from the crowd. He activated a holographic display, showing footage from Earth's final defense. "Watch as your precious home burns, Captain Mitchell. Watch how your species' primitive weapons crumble before real power." The images were meant to break her spirit, but each scene confirmed what Alex had suspected. The Kraxan's attack patterns never deviated from optimal efficiency. No tactical reserves, no contingency formations, because in their minds, perfection needed no backup plan. "Magnificent, isn't it?" A new voice joined the conversation. Science Director Venn stepped forward, his ceremonial robes glittering with embedded data crystals. The perfect fusion of technology and strategy. Alex let her legs shake, as if the footage had weakened her. "Perfect," she agreed, her voice hollow. The tremor in her hands increased, and she heard the guard's satisfaction at her apparent distress. They never noticed how the vibration matched the resonant frequency of their neural restraints, a detail she discovered by accidentally hitting her cuffs against various surfaces over the past week. "You will be our greatest teaching tool," Carl announced. "Every subjugated species will learn from your example." The mighty Captain Mitchell, reduced to a trembling exhibit in our Victory Center. "Educational," Alex mumbled, swaying slightly. Her guards adjusted their grip, unconsciously moving into the positions she'd been conditioning them to take through countless similar displays of weakness. Venn stepped closer, his scientific curiosity evident. "I've studied your combat records, Captain. Your tactics, while primitive, showed interesting patterns. Perhaps." "That's enough, Science Director," Carl interrupted. "This specimen is for display, not study. Return her to her cell. Tomorrow we begin the empire-wide broadcasts of her submission." As the guards led her away, Alex kept her head down to hide her expression. They were so proud of their Victory broadcast network, with its instantaneous transmission across their territory, just like they were proud of their neural restraints, their automated security, and their perfect military formations. Pride made them predictable, and predictability, Alex had learned long ago, was the deadliest weakness in any war. The tremor in her hands continued, exactly matching the frequency it would, given enough time, crystallize the molecular structure of her restraints. One more week, she calculated, one more week of playing the broken warrior, and the Empire's trophy would be ready to show them exactly what human adaptation really meant. Science Director Ven's laboratory hummed with energy as monitoring devices recorded every aspect of Alex's behavior. She sat perfectly still, maintaining the tremor in her hands that had become her trademark among the Kraxan. Today marked her 30th day of captivity and her first private audience with the curious scientist. "Fascinating," Ven muttered, adjusting a sensor with one delicate appendage. "Your species continues to exhibit signs of stress, yet shows no reduction in cognitive function. Most beings we've studied break completely by now." Alex allowed herself a slight smile. "Maybe you're not as good at breaking things as you think." The comment earned her a sharp shock from the restraints, delivered automatically by the monitoring system. She let the pain show on her face, exactly as they expected. The Kraxan never considered that humans might adapt to pain, might learn to use it. "Your attempts at humor are noted," Ven replied, mandibles clicking in what Alex had learned was genuine interest. "Though I fail to see the purpose of such responses in your situation." A commotion outside the laboratory drew their attention. Through the crystalline walls, Alex watched as guards dragged a massive, six-limbed prisoner past the door. The Nexarian's scaled hide bore fresh wounds, but he was laughing. Something she taught him during their shared exercise period. "What is this behavior spreading through the prison sectors?" Ven demanded, compound eyes focusing on Alex with new intensity. 3 species have begun exhibiting similar stress responses, inappropriate vocalizations during punishment. Alex shrugged, letting the movement trigger another tremor. "Laughter is contagious. Haven't you ever found something so absurd you couldn't help but laugh?" "Absurdity is inefficient," Ven stated, but Alex caught the slight hesitation in his movements. "Your species' insistence on finding humor in failure defies logical analysis." "Everything about humans probably defies your analysis," Alex said, carefully watching the scientist's reactions. "We're inefficient, emotional, and supposedly primitive. Yet here I am, still thinking clearly after 30 days of your best efforts to break me." Ven's antennae twitched, a sign of agitation she catalogued during previous observations. Perhaps a new approach is required. Supreme Commander Xarl has authorized enhanced interrogation techniques. The laboratory door slid open, admitting 2 guards with neural prods. Alex recognized them from her daily escorts, the same guards she'd been conditioning through carefully timed displays of weakness. They moved exactly as she predicted, assuming their standard positions for a prisoner transfer. "Before we begin," Alex said, her voice carrying an edge that made Ven pause, "let me tell you a story about human history. We had an empire once that believed they were invincible. They locked their most dangerous prisoner on an island, thinking they'd broken his spirit. The guards activated their neural prods, but Ven raised a limb to stop them. Continue. This historical data may be relevant. They broadcast his defeat across their empire, just like you're doing with me. They made him into a symbol of their power." Alex's trembling hands suddenly steadied. "His name was Napoleon, and do you know what he did?" The laboratory's lights flickered. A power fluctuation she'd noted occurred every day at this exact time, as the Victory Center systems redirected energy for the daily propaganda broadcasts. In that momentary darkness, Alex's restraints crystallized and shattered. He reminded them that you should never confuse capture with defeat. Chaos erupted in precise movements she'd rehearsed in her mind for 30 days. The guards, conditioned to expect her weakness, fell first, then backed away, reaching for the alarm. But Alex was already there, one hand pressing a neural prod against his thorax. "Now," she said calmly, "we're going to have a real scientific discussion about human adaptation, and you're going to help me send a message to every prisoner in this facility." Through the crystalline walls, she could see the Nexarian still laughing as he broke free of his own guards. In the distance, alarms began to sound, but they were already too late. The beast of Earth was awake, and she had spent 30 days teaching her fellow captives how to laugh in the face of empire. Lesson 1. Alex announced to the trembling scientist, "Humans never break. We evolve." The Victory Center's broadcast chamber sparkled like a frozen waterfall, its crystalline surfaces amplifying every flicker of light. Science Director Venn stood rigidly before the transmission array, his limbs trembling slightly as Alex adjusted the neural prod against his thorax. "Begin the transmission," she ordered, her voice carrying the same tremor the Kraxan had grown to expect. "Your regular programming about my mental deterioration. You cannot maintain control forever." Venn clicked, even as he activated the Empire-wide broadcast. "The security forces will follow their perfect protocols," Alex finished. "Just like they're doing now, securing the outer perimeter while completely missing what's happening inside their own communications network." The broadcast initialized, sending her image across thousands of Kraxan-controlled worlds. She let her hands shake more violently, her eyes unfocused, the picture of a broken human spirit they'd been showcasing for weeks. "Today's lesson," she began, her voice cracking perfectly, "is about Earth's ancient warriors. The drums they used for communication." Her words slurred, deteriorating into apparent madness. 1 beat for danger, 2 for safety, 3 for attack. Behind her, Venn's antennae twitched in confusion. "Your mind is truly failing. This broadcast serves no—" "Quiet," Alex commanded, maintaining her unfocused gaze for the cameras. "The rhythm must be perfect. Like the old code. .. Throughout the Victory Center, imprisoned species listened intently. They'd learned over the past weeks to recognize the pattern hidden in her apparent ravings. Morse code, transmitted through careful pauses and emphasis, carrying real messages beneath the seeming nonsense. "The drums," she continued, swaying slightly. "They echo in the maintenance tunnels, section by section, like a heartbeat through the body." In the lower levels, the Nexarian resistance leader translated her coded instructions to his followers. The maintenance tunnels, ignored by the Kraxan's advanced security systems, would allow them to move between sectors undetected. And the ancient warriors, Alex's voice rose and fell rhythmically. They knew that the simplest weapons, the lever, the pulley, the wheel, could topple empires. Her hands trembled more violently as she added seemingly random gestures to her performance. Each movement corresponded to a different section of the Resistance's plan. Signals that would be meaningless to the Kraxan but crystal clear to those she trained. "Fascinating degradation pattern," Venn muttered, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his situation. "The human mind creating elaborate fantasies as it collapses." Alex permitted herself a small smile, knowing the Kraxan viewers would interpret it as another sign of mental breakdown. "Tell me, Director, in all your studies of humanity, did you ever learn about the Trojan horse? Another primitive weapon?" He clicked dismissively. "No," she replied, her voice suddenly steady. "It's about the danger of bringing your enemy's gift inside your walls." The lights flickered, not from a power fluctuation this time, but from the activation of the makeshift electromagnetic pulse devices she'd helped other prisoners construct from stolen parts. They'd hidden them throughout the facility, disguised as religious tokens the Kraxan had deemed harmless. Now, Alex's voice carried across the facility through the broadcast system, all pretense of weakness gone. Let me show you why humans teach military history alongside military technology. The electromagnetic pulses detonated in sequence, creating a cascade of failures through the Victory Center's perfect systems. Security fields collapsed, automated defenses shut down, and blast doors sealed randomly, trapping security forces exactly as she planned. "You see, Director," she continued, knowing her words were still broadcasting across the Empire. "While you were studying my deterioration, I was teaching every prisoner in this facility about human insurgency tactics. Your own propaganda network became our command and control system." Through the crystalline walls, she watched chaos unfold according to her carefully orchestrated plan. Prisoners moved in coordinated groups, using simple mechanical weapons that were immune to the facility's electronic countermeasures. "The art of deception," Alex announced to both her immediate captive and the wider empire, "isn't about fancy technology. It's about understanding how your enemy thinks and using their certainty against them." The revolution she planned for weeks blossomed through the Victory Center like a deadly flower, proving that humanity's greatest weapons had never been their ships or guns, but their ability to adapt, deceive, and inspire. Supreme Commander Xarl watched in mounting horror as the Victory Center's perfect order dissolved into chaos. The security feeds showed impossible scenes, prisoners moving with military precision, using makeshift weapons that ignored their most advanced defenses. At the center of it all, Captain Alexandra Mitchell stood in the broadcast chamber, her transmission still reaching every corner of the Empire. "Security Override Protocol 9. He commanded, his translator barely keeping up with his agitated clicks. "Activate all combat drones." Unable to comply, the facility's AI responded. "Primary systems are experiencing cascading failures. Switching to auxiliary control." "Impossible." Xarl's mandibles clashed in fury. "Our systems are perfect. They cannot be overcome by primitive." His words died as Alex's voice came through every speaker in his command center. "Perfect systems have perfect flaws, Commander. Your drones will respond to exactly one override code, which makes them perfectly useless when that code is compromised." Through the crystalline walls, Xarl watched a wave of escaped prisoners advance through the corridor. The Nexarian at their head carried a simple steel shield, deflecting energy weapons with polished surfaces that would have shattered under kinetic impacts. Behind him, a Zentaran wielded a makeshift crossbow, its mechanical simplicity bypassing energy shields designed to stop plasma weapons. "How?" Xarl demanded, knowing she could hear him through the facility's network. "How did you coordinate this level of resistance?" Alex's laugh echoed through the chambers. "I told you every day, Commander. Through stories of Earth's ancient battles, through lessons about primitive warfare that you dismissed as the ravings of a broken mind. Your own broadcasts carried my training sessions to every prisoner in your empire." The command center's doors burst inward. Xarl found himself facing the squad of former prisoners moving in perfect formation. Human military formation. Their weapons were crude by Kraxan standards, sharpened tools, mechanical launchers, even simple clubs. But they wielded them with a precision that spoke of weeks of careful training. "You see," Alex's voice continued, "while you were proudly showing the galaxy how you'd broken Earth's greatest captain, I was teaching your slaves about human military doctrine, about flanking maneuvers, about improvised weapons, about the weakness of over-specialized defenses." A massive explosion rocked the facility. But not from energy weapons. The prisoners had turned the Victory Center's own water circulation system into a network of hydraulic bombs, using simple pressure principles that no energy shield could stop. "Fall back to secondary positions," Xarl ordered his guards. "Activate emergency protocols." But the guards hesitated, their perfect training falling apart in the face of completely unexpected tactics. They had no protocols for dealing with enemies who turned plumbing into weapons, who used mirrors to redirect energy beams, who fought with coordinated chaos that defied their combat algorithms. The command center's main view screen crackled to life, showing Alex standing amid the chaos of the broadcast chamber. The trembling, broken prisoner was gone, replaced by a warrior whose every movement spoke of calculated victory. "Your empire made a crucial mistake, Commander," she declared, her words broadcasting to every Kraxan world. "You showed them exactly how to break us, how to control us, how to defeat us, but you never taught them why none of that ever works for long." Through the security feeds, Sarl watched in disbelief as more sectors fell to the rebellion. Prisoners using human tactics overwhelmed his perfect defenses with imperfect, unpredictable attacks. Guards trained to respond to specific threats found themselves facing enemies who changed strategies mid-battle, who used failure as a weapon, who turned retreat into ambush. Humanity's greatest strength. Alex continued, her voice carried on waves of rebellion spreading through the facility, isn't our technology, or our weapons, or even our tactics. It's our ability to teach others how to break their chains. The last security feed showed the Victory Center's main gates falling to a surge of free prisoners. They moved like a single organism, applying human squad tactics with alien bodies, turning their diverse physiologies into advantages that no combat computer could predict. "You wanted to show the galaxy a broken warrior," Alex concluded, as the command center's defenses finally failed. "Instead, you've shown them exactly why humanity never breaks. We just teach others how to fight." The Kraxan warship Eternal Glory hung in orbit above the Victory Center, its crystalline hull reflecting starlight like a manufactured constellation. Captain Alexandra Mitchell stood on its bridge, surrounded by a crew of former prisoners who had traded their chains for control stations. Behind her, the facility that had been her prison burned with carefully orchestrated chaos. "Status report," she commanded, watching as more escape pods launched from the surface. Each one carried seeds of revolution to different corners of the Empire. "Main systems are responding to our control overrides," reported Kittel, the Zentaran engineer she trained in human mechanical principles. The Kraxan never considered anyone would try to pilot their ships manually. Alex nodded, remembering how she'd spent weeks teaching her fellow prisoners about human naval tactics. "Begin transmission to all frequencies. Let's show the Empire what their perfect warship can do in imperfect hands." The ship's communication array activated, broadcasting across the same network that had once showcased her supposed breakdown. "This is Captain Alexandra Mitchell to all occupied worlds. The Victory Center has fallen. Your guards are in chaos. Their perfect systems have failed. Now let me teach you something about human naval warfare." On the tactical display, she watched Kraxan response ships approaching in textbook formation. Their commanders, trained in optimal battle algorithms, couldn't comprehend the seemingly erratic course she plotted. "Helm, execute pattern break," she ordered, "just like we practiced." The Eternal Glory lurched as Kittal disabled the ship's automated stabilizers. The massive vessel began to tumble, appearing damaged and out of control. Kraxan commanders, seeing only what their combat computers told them, moved to capture the apparently crippled ship. "They're deploying tractor beams," Kittal reported, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Exactly as you predicted. Humans learned long ago that the best way to spring a trap is to look trapped." Alex allowed herself a grim smile. "Execute Phase 2. The ship's tumble suddenly transformed into a controlled spin. Modules that the Kraxan had designated as decorative revealed themselves as makeshift weapon ports. The rebels had spent hours reconfiguring them based on Alex's lessons about ancient naval warfare. "Launch the buoys," she commanded. Dozens of small objects ejected from the ship, appearing to be debris from their apparent damage. The Kraxan ships ignored them, their sensors calibrated only for energy weapons and modern threats. They never noticed that each piece of debris carried a simple mechanical timer. "All ships within range," Kittal announced. "The net is ready." Alex keyed the broadcast again. "Let me tell you about an old Earth tactic called crossing the T, and how humans used to win battles with nothing but well-placed flotsam." The buoys detonated in sequence, creating a chain reaction that rippled through space. Rather than explosive force, they released clouds of metallic particles. primitive chaff that turned the battlefield into a maze of sensor-blocking clouds. "Now," Alex ordered, "show them what happens when you combine human ingenuity with alien technology." The Eternal Glory's engines roared to full power, its trajectory curving through the chaff clouds in ways that defied Kraxan combat doctrine. Alex had taught her crew how ancient submarine captains used thermal layers to hide. The same principle now applied to the three-dimensional battlefield of space. Kraxan ships, their perfect formations suddenly blind, began firing randomly into the clouds. Their energy weapons only succeeded in ionizing the particles, creating more interference. In the confusion, Alex's crew implemented maneuvers based on age-old human naval tactics, attacking from unexpected vectors with weapons the Kraxan had dismissed as obsolete. "Multiple impacts confirmed," Catal reported with savage satisfaction. "Their shields are calibrated for energy weapons, not kinetic strikes. Broadcast to all frequencies," Alex commanded, knowing her words would reach every rebel cell she'd helped create. This is how humanity fights, not with perfect systems, but with adaptation. Not with optimal solutions, but with impossible ones. The Eternal Glory emerged from the chaos like a shark from murky waters, leaving disabled Kraxan ships in its wake. As they set course for the nearest rebel-controlled system, Alex watched the tactical display light up with similar battles across the sector. Former prisoners using human tactics to turn the Empire's own ships against them. "Send one final message to Supreme Commander Xarl," she ordered. "Tell him that his trophy has just become his nightmare." The Kraxan homeworld's orbital defense grid stretched across space like a crystalline web, each node pulsing with enough energy to vaporize a capital ship. In the command center of the Eternal Glory, Captain Alexandra Mitchell studied the display with the same focused intensity she'd once used to plan her prison break. 57 defense platforms, Catal reported, his Zentaran eyes tracking multiple readouts simultaneously, each one linked to their central combat network. "Perfect coverage, no blind spots. Perfect is predictable," Alex replied, her fingers tracing patterns on the tactical display. "And the Kraxan's definition of perfection is their greatest weakness. Show me the rebel fleet status." The display shifted, revealing dozens of stolen Kraxan vessels approaching from different vectors. Each one crewed by former prisoners she trained, each one modified according to her instructions about human warfare. "All ships report ready," Catal confirmed, though many still question the wisdom of attacking the homeworld directly. Alex activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "This is Captain Mitchell to all ships. I know many of you think this attack is suicide. The Kraxan believe the same thing, which is exactly why we'll succeed. Remember your training. Remember what humanity taught you about turning weakness into strength." She turned to her tactical officer, a massive Nexarian named Grok, whose 6 arms could operate multiple stations simultaneously. "Begin Phase 1. Show them what we learned from Earth's ancient siege warfare." The rebel fleet launched its first wave, not of weapons, but of cargo containers. The Kraxan defense grid registered them as debris, their sensors programmed to ignore anything without power signatures or obvious weapon profiles. "Containers approaching optimal range," Grok reported. "Defense platforms responding exactly as predicted." Alex nodded, watching the Kraxan automated systems adjust to intercept what they perceived as a clumsy attempt at infiltration. Now they'll redirect power to their forward shields, just like they've done in every recorded battle. "Energy spike detected," Catal confirmed. "They're powering up their main weapon arrays." "Perfect." Alex's smile held the satisfaction of a teacher whose students had learned well. "Execute Phase 2. Show them how humanity used to break castle walls." The cargo containers burst open, but instead of troops or weapons, they released clouds of simple stone debris. Chunks of rock harvested from mineral-rich asteroids, each piece carefully selected for its crystalline structure. "Rocks." One of the bridge crew clicked in confusion. "Against their defense grid." The Kraxan based their entire defense system on the properties of crystals. Alex explained, watching as the debris cloud drifted toward the defense platforms. They believe their crystalline technology is perfect. And they're right. It's perfectly vulnerable to resonance. The debris cloud reached the first defense platform. As predicted, the platform's energy shields ignored the simple rocks, seeing them as harmless space debris. But these particular rocks had been chosen for their ability to amplify and reflect energy, just like the crystals the Kraxan used in their own technology. Phase 3, Alex commanded. All ships, execute pattern scatter. The rebel fleet split apart, each ship launching more debris clouds from different angles. The Kraxan defense grid, programmed to track enemy vessels, couldn't adapt to an attack that wasn't technically an attack. First resonance cascade detected, Catal reported with growing excitement. Defense Platform 7 is experiencing power fluctuations. Alex watched as her plan unfolded. The crystalline debris, energized by the defense grid's own power, began creating feedback loops in the Kraxan's perfect network. Each platform's attempt to compensate only made the resonance stronger. Send the signal to all resistance cells on the surface, she ordered. Tell them, the walls are falling. Across the orbital grid, defense platforms began to shatter, their perfect crystalline structures torn apart by their own energy reflected and amplified through carefully chosen rocks. The imperfect becoming the perfect weapon against perfection itself. Multiple breaches detected, Grok announced. The defense grid is collapsing sector by sector. All ships, prepare for surface assault. Alex broadcast to the fleet. Remember what I taught you about combined arms tactics. Today we proved that humanity's greatest victory isn't breaking an empire. It's teaching others how to break their own chains. The rebel fleet surged forward through gaps in the failing defense grid, carrying the revolution to the heart of the empire that had thought itself unbreakable. Supreme Commander Xarl stood in the Imperial Palace's grand chamber, watching through crystalline walls as his perfect world crumbled. The rebel fleet had breached the orbital defenses using tactics no combat computer could have predicted. Now, former slaves fought their way through the streets using human military techniques that turned the city's perfect architecture against its defenders. The last defensive line has fallen, his adjutant reported, mandibles clicking in distress. Captain Mitchell's forces approached the palace. Impossible, Xarl muttered, though the evidence of his failure surrounded him. Our systems are perfect. Our strategy is optimal. We cannot be defeated by primitive methods. The palace doors burst open. Captain Alexandra Mitchell strode in, flanked by warriors of a dozen different species, all moving with the coordinated precision she'd taught them. Her makeshift honor guard included Kittel, Grok, and other former prisoners who'd learned humanity's lessons well. Your perfect systems, Alex announced, her voice carrying through the chamber, are exactly why you lost. You made everything so optimal that you forgot how to adapt. Xarl's guards moved to attack, their weapons charging with crystalline energy. But the rebels responded with moves no training simulation had prepared them for, combat techniques drawn from Earth's countless martial arts, adapted for alien physiologies. I studied your empire while you thought you were studying me. Alex continued, advancing as her forces systematically dismantled the palace guard. You made everything perfect, predictable, optimal. But nature doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. Our empire brought order to chaos, Xarl declared, his translator struggling to convey his fury. We elevated primitive species, gave them purpose, showed them perfection. You showed them a cage, Alex corrected. A beautiful crystalline cage that they never questioned because it was too perfect to break. She gestured to her companions. Until someone taught them that perfection is just another kind of weakness. The last palace guards fell, disarmed by techniques they couldn't counter because they'd never been programmed to expect them. Xarl found himself alone, facing the prisoner he'd once mocked. I challenge you, he declared, falling back on ancient protocols. Single combat, as our laws demand. Or are human warriors too primitive for our traditions? Alex smiled, and for the first time, Sarl felt true fear. "Accept," she commanded, her voice broadcast throughout the palace. "Let everyone see what happens when perfect forms meet adaptive skill." The combat ring emerged from the chamber floor, a circle of crystalline light marking the boundaries. Sarl stepped forward, his cybernetic combat systems engaging, feeding him optimal attack patterns. "No energy weapons," Alex declared, removing her borrowed Kraxan sidearm. "Just you and me, Commander. Skill against skill." Sarl's first attack was perfect, a combination calculated for maximum efficiency against human physiology. But Alex moved like water, turning his strength against him with techniques drawn from Earth's ancient martial arts. "You trained to fight perfectly," she said, deflecting another calculated strike. "I trained to fight creatively." Her counterattack borrowed from a dozen different styles, improvising combinations no combat computer could predict. "Impossible," Sarl gasped as another perfect attack failed. "Our combat algorithms are unbeatable." "That's your problem," Alex replied, suddenly switching from defensive techniques to an aggressive style that forced Sarl to retreat. "You think there's only one way to win. Humans know better. We know that victory often comes from finding the path no one else would take." The final exchange lasted seconds. Sarl's perfect form met human adaptability, and perfection shattered. The supreme commander of the Kraxan Empire fell, defeated by techniques his perfect systems had dismissed as primitive. Alex stood over him, not as a conqueror, but as a teacher. "Your empire's greatest mistake wasn't capturing me," she declared to the watching crowd. "It was teaching everyone that perfection means never having to change. Humanity knows better. We know that true strength comes from constant adaptation, from learning, from growing." She turned to address the rebels, the former slaves, the warriors she trained. "This victory isn't just humanity's. It belongs to everyone who learned to break free from the cage of perfection. To everyone who discovered that being flawed, being imperfect, being willing to adapt, that's what makes us truly unbeatable." The crystalline walls of the imperial palace reflected infinite images of the scene. A human warrior standing tall, surrounded by students of a dozen species, all of them living proof that the greatest victory isn't in achieving perfection, but in learning how to transcend it.